Yesterday, I was working on converting this photo to black and white. Whilst I was doing this, I realised I use a couple of techniques that you might not. So in this video, I'm going to show you what I did to create the black and white conversion. I'll be working with Affinity Photo 2, but you can use the first version as well as Photoshop to do the same thing. I've already opened the colour image in Affinity Photo, and I'll start by adding a black and white adjustment layer. I'm sure many of you are already familiar with this adjustment layer, but for anyone who isn't, it allows you to control how the colours in an image convert to black and white. Taking the cyan slider as a quick example, when I move it left, cyan areas of the image, like the sky, become darker. Then when I move it to the right, it makes them lighter. The first thing to do when using this adjustment is to understand how each slider affects the image. But it's important you check this for each slider on its own. Take the first slider, moving it left and then right whilst watching the effect on the image. You then return the slider to its default position so that it doesn't affect the other sliders. When you've checked all the sliders, you'll probably find 2 or 3 that have a big effect on the image. These are the sliders you're going to use to adjust the black and white conversion. This image is a bit unusual because we have 4 sliders that create a strong effect. These are the red, yellow, cyan and blue sliders. But there's also a problem I need to highlight when converting this image to black and white. Watch what happens when I move the cyan slider to the left. It creates a powerful black and white conversion of the mountain range whilst darkening the sky. But look what's happened to the river. It's almost vanished into the landscape. What I really wanted with this image is for the river to appear almost white and so it stands out against the landscape. And for that, I need to move the cyan slider to the right. Now we have the river clearly separated from the landscape. But look what's happened to the sky and mountains. They look terrible. This is quite a common problem with converting landscape photos to black and white. Which brings me on to what I do differently when using a black and white adjustment layer. You see, I don't use just one layer, but instead I add 2 or more layers to the image. To get the best from this image, like a lot of landscape images, we need to convert some areas differently to others. Let's start by converting only the sky and mountains to black and white. To do this, I'll move the cyan slider to the left. This produces a nice level of contrast in the mountains without losing any detail. Next, I'll move the blue slider to the left to darken the sky and mountains, but to a lesser degree. The mountains and sky now look great, but the foreground looks terrible and we can't see the river. Let's close the dialog now because I want to add a mask to the layer. I'm going to use this to hide the black and white conversion on the lower part of the image. I'll do this by drawing a black gradient onto the mask. I can then adjust the gradient to leave the foreground in colour. Now I can add a second black and white adjustment layer above the first one. This converts the lower part of the image, but it doesn't have any effect on the area already converted to black and white. Now I can move the cyan slider to the right to lighten the river. To make the river stand out even more against the landscape, I can then move the yellow slider to the left to darken the land. Then, to add a little bit more definition into the landscape, I'll move the red slider right. I'm now controlling the black and white conversion using 2 separate adjustment layers. One controls the mountains and sky, whilst the other controls the foreground and river. Now for another technique I use with these layers, which can further enhance the conversion. I'm going to do this by adding a levels adjustment just below the 2 black and white conversion layers. It's important that this is below the black and white layers because we want to use it to alter the hues in the colour image. In the Levels dialog, I'm now going to select each of the 3 colour channels in turn, starting with the red. Then I can move the gamma slider left and right to see how it affects the black and white image before picking the best. Next, switch to the green channel and try the same, moving the slider left and right. And finally, switch to the blue channel and do the same. If I turn off the 2 black and white adjustment layers, you can see what's happening to the colours in the image. By moving the gamma sliders for the individual colour channels, I'm changing the colour balance in the image. This then affects how the black and white adjustment layer converts the colour image into black and white. It's also why it's important to put the layer below the black and white conversions. Watch what happens if I add a levels adjustment layer at the top of the other layers instead. Now when I change one of the colour channels, it adds a colour tone to the black and white image. Going back to our first levels adjustment layer, I want to mention that it's also possible to control the conversion using the black and the white level sliders. It can be difficult trying to get your head around how you're affecting the colour image when you're doing this, but it's actually much easier than you think. In the next video, I explain exactly what effect each of these sliders is having on the image. Thanks for watching today, and if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe. I hope to see you again soon for another video.